Sketch and I are going to talk about Katsucon, which we went to about 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, yeah.
It is a convention held right outside of Washington, D.C. in National Harbor, Maryland. And it's held every President's Day weekend in February, which is nice because, some people have school or work off on the President's Day on the Monday. So it kind of gives you a nice long weekend to recover from the convention. We, unfortunately, this year, encountered a wonderful winter storm that decided to hit almost the entire country, or at least the entire eastern half of the country.
Eastern coast, yeah. And if you have to say it's a perfect storm, it was pretty damn perfect.
Yeah, and I think it started in the southern part of the country Wednesday night and went through the entire eastern seaboard up 95 corridor on Thursday, and then kept going till almost at least through the morning on Friday.
Yeah.
So it pretty much took up the entire travel, time span that most people were going to be getting to the convention. Now, the convention wasn't canceled or delayed or anything like that, but for the 48 hours leading up to it, I think almost everybody we knew was scrambling because flights got canceled, trains got canceled. We were driving and we decided to do it anyway, but we ended up taking extra people because that was the only way they could get there. We know of one person that were cosplay acquaintances with who got so frustrated their flight got canceled 3 times trying to get in from Texas that they just went and rented a car and drove cross country from Dallas to get to Washington, D.C., which is a little crazy, but that's what they had to do to get there. And we actually almost in Connecticut turned around because the weather was so horrendous.
Yeah, it got to one point where I was driving and it got to about maybe 20 feet visibility where I could see what was in front of me. I barely could make out taillights after that. And so I was like, all right, let's just pull over. We'll just stop somewhere. Of course, no one was plowing in Connecticut because you guys don't plow till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But we stayed for about an hour, but then it cleared up and we looked at our smartphones and saw the weather, it kind of moved on. So we're like, all right, let's just get to 95. Let's get to the major highway that leads around New York. And by then, everything kind of picked up, and it was pretty good until
Baltimore.
We got just past Baltimore.
And then, the last 30 miles, I think, to the convention center took us 2.5 hours, and it was a nightmare. And when we finally got there,
a 7-hour trip took 12 hours.
Yeah, exactly 12 hours. And when we got there, we had nice stiff drinks with I think everyone else who had just survived that trip into. I mean, we weren't alone. There were lots of people that did that. For better or for worse, but we all made it, and it was actually became kind of a thing throughout the weekend when you talked to people that you didn't were meeting people. It was like, so how was your trip in, and how did you get here?
Yeah, it wasn't small talk at that point. It was serious. How did you do it?
Or how many times did you spin off the road?
But this is what brings me to the facilities around the Gaylord. Is that the hotels? There's actually ample parking garages. So your car wasn't really covered with snow once you got it in there. And they all run in a system. If you're staying there at a hotel, you just use your hotel card and you can use your car. A lot of other places kind of difficult. You have to either go in and out and you have to reinstitute your ticket.
Yeah,
this one they're like, oh, you were clearly a car at a hotel. You're going in and out, whatever, we're already charging you on your parking bill. So
you get to use your room key?
Yeah, room
That's
key,
pretty cool.
So if I needed to drive into DC or around somewhere, I could have just exit with my room key and come back with my room key and not had any additional charges.
That's one of the best things about Katsucon, and we talked about this a little bit when we went last year. The facility is fantastic. It's held at the Gaylord Hotel and Convention Center in National Harbor, and the actual hotel itself is fantastic. It's very spread out. This year they weren't sharing the space with another convention the way they were last year, and so there was plenty of room. It never felt crowded. And we had I think it had the best dealer's room layout of any convention I've ever been to, in that the aisles between the vendors are so wide, it's almost double the space of the actual vendor booths in between.
Yeah.
I was carrying around my, I was cosplaying a Sango from Inuyasha, and I had the big boomerang, and I was carrying it in the dealer's room, which many places, even in a larger convention, I would feel uncomfortable doing that because I feel like I'm in the way of people or hitting people or whatever, and there I didn't feel even remotely like I was in the way at all.
I mean, some people might say it was a little too open, but I always say when you're dealing with crowds of people, always go on the extra. Don't try to say, oh well, people are so many feet across. We can cram people, because we've been to conventions where I'm not surprised the fire department shut down the convention. They were trying to stuff people. So it was very nice and very roomy. You really don't feel like you're going to step on somebody trying to look at something.
I think the artist alley also was set up very similar way. It had a lot of great spaces in between, which also was nice because people could actually get to the booth, and you didn't feel like even if you were talking to the person who was working there or discussing a product, that other people couldn't come in and see what was going on. Which sometimes I felt like that in those rooms where something I'm interested in and purchasing or looking at, and there's such a crowd of people around the booth, I can't even see it, and I just keep walking. So that was really nice to see. And in general, it's just a great convention space for the size of the convention they have.
Yeah.
They use it really well. You never have to wait, I feel like, in line for a panel at the Masquerade. They do make you wait in line, and the lines do get huge, but it's completely unnecessary to wait, because I know I walked into a panel like 10 minutes late and there was plenty of seating. I was able to get a good seat. Or even, I know that I went to the Masquerade 20 minutes late and there was a huge line for that, but I was able to walk right in and get a good seat. So it's not LineCon.
And most of the conventions, they do very well with screens in larger rooms, so you can see stuff if you're not supposedly ideally located. So that was great.
I think the other thing that's really nice, and that I've noticed with Katsucon the last few years, is their attendees tend to be really nice. And I mean, there's not really anything a convention has any control over that.
No,
I don't know if it's the part of the country or who it attracts, but they just seem to be super friendly and non-combative. And I'm sure there's stories, and I'm sure there's bad people, because that happens everywhere. But as a culture,
generally, we noticed that they're very pleasant attendees.
Very well behaved. You don't see a lot of yelling. You don't see running around. You don't see kind of this crazy out of control stuff going on. The Gaylord has a lot of really nice areas that can be used for photography, and every sign says don't climb on this stuff, but everybody's climbing on the stuff to get the picture. But they're very respectful about it. People aren't doing bad things. You feel like they're trying to be careful, and as a result, I've never seen anyone there yell at people for that, even though it's clearly against their rules to be climbing in the foliage and the plants and whatever. And also, I know that I noticed that when we were in costume and we were maybe late to something and trying to run to like a photo shoot, and people want to take our picture, and they're like, "Oh, can I get a picture?" And if we said, "Sorry, we're in a hurry, maybe you can catch us later," they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Like, nobody was pissy about it, which was really cool.
Yeah, and another thing I have to say about the congoers is that we'll get back to this, but I came down with the con plague very hard, and unfortunately, when I did have energy to get out into the convention center, I tended to lose things. Like
a lot of things.
Like a lot of things, like my cell phone or a very small prop or something like that. And what I have to say about what's great about the attendance, the attendees, was that in very timely fashion, in the worst case, the longest wait was by the end of the day, someone returned it because I found it and gave it to security.
Yeah, it was amazing. I mean, he lost his phone, one of these, iPhone, and 20 minutes later we had it back. And then you lost your wand from Harry Potter, a really nice one, and it actually wasn't even the end of the day. They got it back. We just went later to go retrieve it.
Again, I was con-plagued. It
was bad. But also the attendees were really respectful of that too. I know you were dressed up as one of the characters and they wanted a hug, and you said, "I'm really sick," and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry."
I figured, I'll just man up and I'll dress up as Jiraiya.
Yeah.
And this one guy's like, "Dude, I really want a hug," and I'm like, "Dude, I'm really sick," and he's like, "Oh, thank you." So in general, I'd say the culture there is just very nice, and we met lots of people, and it was really awesome. I feel like, and I've said this before, I think about Katsucon, it's a very social convention, and that's really great. You can go out for drinks with people, and it's really positive. On the flip side, we didn't have the greatest experience dealing with their staff. And it's kind of more of a generalized thing, and and I think that part of it comes from disorganization. I know that personally we didn't have to deal with things like panels and performances or anything at this convention, but we did know people that did, and up until almost like days before the convention, they didn't know what they were supposed to do, things they were approved for, times things were happening, where they had to be and when. I mean, things that you want to know at least a week out, if not a lot sooner. Yeah. And I mean, Katsucon tries to fill in a lot of programming. They are one of the 24-hour.
Or they bill it as a 24-hour.
So they have stuff at 3 o'clock in the morning. But if you don't know if that's when you're getting your panel slot,
I mean, that's
tough
something
to plan for.
It's a kind of a weird thing. I mean, I think a lot of people have this idea that 24 hours of programming is fantastic, but I mean, how much of an audience are you going to get for your panel when it's at 5, 6 in the morning? I mean, I can see late at night people want to play in the video game room a lot, or they want to watch anime, but when people are giving pretty decent panels like that early in the morning, you wonder if it's worthwhile. I don't know if they've really looked into that, but
I remember in the panels I've been, they'd sit there with someone was counting how many people are actually in the room.
Yeah,
in each panel.
It makes it difficult. But I also found that registration was a nightmare. I was pre-registered. Sketch was trying to get a press badge. Yeah. And when I walked in Thursday, we thought Thursday night would be a great time to go because so many people were still trying to get there. Yeah. And the line wasn't moving and it was out the door. And it took hours.
It definitely was a ratio of how many people can... how many staffers can address a person getting their badge, and how many people pre-reg. And honestly, it seemed like they needed at least a good another five more
they need to think about
minimally to get that line going a little bit faster. The only problem I also had too is that they would say, oh, this is registration, but we have pre-registration, registration at the convention, and then other services like other types of badges, press and whatnot. And there was no labeling of what giant amount of line and a group of people was what.
Or even a greeter. Like, I know sometimes you go into the registration room and there's someone right at the door that says, okay, what do you need? This is this line, this is this line, there was nobody. So I walked and I wandered and I had to ask, and finally there was a desk that said VIP registration, and that wasn't me, but I figured those are staff members, I could ask them. And so I asked and I said, where's the pre-registration line start? And what offended me was they took great pleasure in saying, it's all the way back there, ha ha, you should have done VIP. And I wanted to be like, assholes, I don't want to pay an extra $50, just tell me where the line is, you don't have to be a jerk about it. And then I also had another bad experience with staff when you had lost your phone.
Yeah, so we were traveling with each other trying to find my phone.
Right, you were asking the concierge at the hotel, and we thought we'd go, because you were sick, we didn't want you to walk everywhere. We were going to go ask security at the convention, and I couldn't find security, but I saw the information desk. So I went up to information, I said, I need to report a lost phone, where is this, because we need to find security. I'm like, oh yeah, I know, can you direct me where that is? And they just said, oh, it's down there. And I'm like, well, what part of the hallway is across the hall? And they're like, just put your hand on the wall and walk.
Yeah.
And they made me walk all the way down the hallway when it was across the hall.
Yeah, so
I was
all their departments are in these little kiosks, which one say registration above all of them, which gets confusing. So they have banners on the side, but when you have a crowd of people, you can't see a standing banner. You can't see above. Anyway, but this is where it was. It was, here's the information, here was medical, here was security. She pretty much walked all the way down the hallway, fell on the right wall, came all the way back to get to here.
And by the time I came back, I was furious. I'm not gonna lie. I was so mad.
And I had gone there and got my phone.
And I was just glad at that point you'd gotten it. Yeah. And the security, they were very nice. But it was just, if you're going to be the information desk, you need to be really good at getting information. Like, I've asked other conventions, they have a map, they draw it for me, whatever. Like, train your people a little better. But that was my big complaint, I think, of the weekend, was just some of that. But that said, their variety of programming is really good.
Oh, yes.
Excellent. They had a whole track called, I think it's JCI, Japanese Cultural Institute, where they had this entire section of the convention that was basically focused on Japan and the culture. So you could go and do history classes, basically. They had the brush painting and the kimono and like tea ceremony and some of the things you maybe see at other conventions that were run by the Kamaku girls who go to quite a few conventions. But they also had, if you wanted to study abroad in Japan, you were a college student, they had a whole thing that you could go to and learn how to do that. They had a travel agency there. If you want to take a trip to Japan, that you could go and sit down with them and meet up with them. And I almost wanted to do that. I mean, I just thought that was really cool that they took the opportunity that, they have all these people who are interested in Japanese culture and actually really promoted that much more than I've seen any other convention do. And I thought that was phenomenal. And then they also just had a really good body of work. We went and saw Kami, I forget how to pronounce her name, Komi? I don't know how she says
You're
it.
asking me to pronounce a Japanese-inspired name. Good luck.
Whatever. Anyway, she's a fantastic cosplayer. I can put up her link. She did all sorts of panels about prop making and armor making because that's her specialty, and she's written a book about it. And that was a phenomenal panel. Several of us went to that, and she did a wonderful job.
I think I limped in at some point and looked at it and agreed with everything she was saying, and then limped out and lost my phone. But
and we also went to the Masquerade and the World Cosplay Summit competition, which were really interesting. World Cosplay Summit, I mean, that was kind of scary for them because they had to have it, and yet so many people were having trouble getting there. So they actually did work around the storm pretty well. I think they moved judging to the next day to try to get people more time to arrive and get all their stuff, you know, at the place to do all those amazing skits. But they did some incredible skits, and I wish I could show you some, but unfortunately, and I don't know if this is a rule of the convention or not, but staff people were telling people not to record.
Unless you were in the press section, which is up front, but
they wouldn't let us into that. So fortunately we can't show you footage from the Masquerade performances. They were excellent. Look them up on YouTube. People did a phenomenal job.
They really stepped it up.
They really did. So all in all, I mean, and then at the end we both ended up ridiculously ill, which almost everyone else at Katsucon ended up getting like the flu.
And actually, I think this really was a flu.
Yeah, everybody, it was
too
fevers
hard, too fast,
and it wasn't like the normal like calm plague. It was like we couldn't move from our bed from like beginning maybe first half of Sunday to Monday when we had to drive home. And by the time we got home, people that didn't get sick at the convention, they were all sick. And so everyone needs to bring disinfectant wipes next year or something, because there was something going around.
And there was no way to tell where it came from. I don't think it was. It could have been holding a handrail. I don't know
we were
how
fine, and then we were done. Like we were absolutely fine, and then like an hour later, you just felt like death.
Yeah, it hit you really fast. Within like 6 hours, you're like, oh. Like I started off with me like, my throat's getting a little dry. I'll maybe just get a cough drop just to prevent it. Ha ha ha. I had a massive fever that night. I actually threw myself in the bathtub to cool down.
It was bad.
It was bad.
Anyway, I mean, in the future, it's also a great place that, as the convention winds down, especially because it is a long weekend, to do some sightseeing if you haven't been to the nation's capital. So many of the museums are free, and we had lots of great intentions to go do that because we were staying till Monday, but unfortunately, we couldn't get out of bed.
Well, what's great is public transportation actually goes to
a lot of
the
those
area
sites,
to get you into DC, so you don't have to really worry about parking.
Right. So it's really a good convention. I think they do have some technical issues they need to straighten out, and I think they're perfectly capable of doing that. I think it's more like getting the right people to acknowledge what's going on, maybe getting some better training, definitely getting some help in their registration to move that line a lot faster, because there's no reason that pre-reg should be waiting hours in line.
No.
That would be fantastic. But we despite the fact you got sick and I got sick again, we actually had a really good time.
No, we had fun. I had fun. I mean, I enjoy going down there and going to that convention.
And it's also a great convention right at the beginning of the year, start off the season. So if you're able to get there, check it out.
So if you have any additional opinions about Katsucon or anything like that, go to our forums or leave us a voicemail of your interpretation of Katsucon.
Or your adventure in getting there, because I know you have stories, because we heard so many at the convention.
So you just call us up as
762?
762 adequate. 762-233-7868.
Have you forgotten?
I think I've forgotten.
You used to be so good at this.
I haven't done the
Anyway, Patrick
meeting review.
We'll put it right here.
Right there.
Right there. So check us out, hit us up on social media, and we'll be at Anime Boston next month. So if you're going to be there, say hi.